WTOC's first virtual town hall. These are uncertain times, and many of us have questions about the coronavirus and its impact on our communities. We are working to get you those answers with local, state, and federal officials. But first, here is the very latest on the numbers coming in from the state of Georgia. Those numbers were just released at 7 p.m. There are 4,117 confirmed cases in the state, 885 people are in the hospital, and 125 deaths. As these numbers continue to increase, it is important for us to get information and know what we should be doing. Tonight, we're talking with our Congressman, Buddy Carter, who represents Georgia's 1st District. I want to thank you so much for being with us, sir. We certainly know that you have been bombarded by questions.
Yes.
We'll let you know, too, that we're observing the social distancing. We are 6 feet apart, so we won't get any closer tonight. Let's start now with some of the many questions that our viewers have emailed in to our virtual town hall. Why wasn't the state of Georgia closing the borders to non-citizens or non-essential travel? As a person with high-risk medical conditions, I am quarantined at home. However, my husband is potentially exposed when he leaves the house for groceries and essentials. Aren't people traveling from high-risk areas like New York getting Georgians at risk? And how can this be stopped?
Well, the governor has made the decision not to close the borders at this point. He has decided to let the local authorities make those kind of decisions. And we've gotten a lot of calls on this particular question in our office, particularly because we represent the entire coast of Georgia. And on I-95, if people are trying to get into Florida, they're being stopped and turned back. And a lot of those people are staying at hotels along I-95, and a lot of people are rightfully concerned. But the governor has made the decision, and I think it's probably the right decision at this point to just leave it up to local authorities on how they want to handle those situations.
Thanks a lot. Congressman, we also want to talk to you about some lower income people who don't file income taxes because of their income rate and the stimulus checks. This viewer says that she also has a disabled dependent. How will that person as well as this, both of them, get their checks?
Well, first of all, if she's got a Social Security number, she's going to get a check, and that's very important. I suspect that since she has a dependent who is disabled, that she's probably getting some federal aid. And if she is, then she will get a check. And she'll also get a check for the person who is the dependent. She'll get a check for $500 for the dependent, and for the individual, it'll be $1,200. Now, for the family, the maximum is $2,400, and that is up to those who make $75,000 or less. Now, if they make more than $75,000, between $75,000 and $99,000, then it's tiered. And after $99,000, then you don't get a check.
Thank you so much, sir. Moving on to question number 3, as COVID-19 progresses, at what point do you think the governor should put in a shelter-in-place mandatory order? Some other states with fewer cases have already locked down.
Well, again, this is the governor's decision, and let's face it, Georgia is a very diverse state. And we always said when I was in the state legislature, there are 2 Georgias, there's Atlanta and everywhere else. And what's good for Atlanta may not necessarily be good for Hoboken. What's good for Albany, which had been a hot spot and had a lot of cases, is not necessarily what's going to be good for Nahana. And that's something we have to take into consideration, and that's what the governor has allowed to happen. He's letting the decisions be made at the local level, at the closest that it can be made.
Do you think there would be a time when he should step in and make that decision for everyone?
Well, I suspect if things do get worse that he will review it, and I suspect he's probably reviewing it every day to look and monitor the situation. He's a very responsible person, and he has the welfare of the citizens at mind. So I'm very confident he'll make the right decision, but at this point, I think he has made the right decision.
So, move on to our next question is, if you work more than one job and your hours have been reduced or you've been laid off from one of those jobs, do you still qualify for the unemployment benefits, even if you're still working one of the multiple jobs?
Well, keep in mind now that every state is different in their unemployment benefits. That's why it's very important and why we encourage you to go to our website, buddycarter.house.gov, G-O-V. Go to our website. There's a link there to the Department of Labor so that you can ask these type of questions, these individual questions, because it really does depend on the state and really does depend on certain factors. It can vary from state to state and certainly from situation to situation. But one thing I want to make perfectly clear now, don't think that you can just quit your job and all of a sudden you're qualified to get unemployment. That is not the case. There have to be reasons, and there have to be good reasons. Now, we wrote this legislation, the CARES Act, with making sure that it was very broad and with stipulations in there that if you test positive, someone in your house tests positive, or your child's out of school, you will be qualified for those type of assistance, and that was very important. But again, I would encourage you, go to our website, link and click on the link to the Department of Labor, and then we can get you answers on that.
It's just been amazing. A lot of our questions have dealt with people who have multiple jobs, and one job ended while maybe the other one did not. So your answer to them is?
Well, again, that depends, and it will depend on how the state approaches it.
We're going to stick with Georgia.
We're going to stick with Georgia, and it will depend on the labor commissioner, and what he decides and what his office decides is going to dictate that. So, again, these are individual decisions, and there are parameters that they have to follow, and certainly we set the parameters in the CARES Act, but at the same time, I would encourage them to make sure that they're looking at the website, make sure that they are getting the answers for them individually that they need.
Also check with the Department of Labor.
Absolutely.
Too. Thanks a lot, sir. Well, why is it taking so long to get the COVID-19 test results? This viewer's granddaughter works at an emergency room and was exposed to the virus. She was tested last Thursday and still has not gotten any results as of yet.
This has been one of the disappointments that we've had. Let's face it, the labs have been inundated, and right now there's a backlog. We've gotten tons of calls in our office from people who we sent the results in, or we sent the test in over 8 days ago, still haven't gotten the results yet. And it's just the backlog. At first it was the state labs that were backed up, and the private labs were giving a quicker response. Now it's kind of flip-flopped. So as you know, Abbott Laboratories has come out with a new in-home test that will give you the results in less than 5 minutes. That is something that we're looking forward to getting. It's my understanding they're producing over 100,000 of those every day now. As soon as we can get those in place, we're going to get that. But let me say this now. Just because you have not tested positive for this virus does not mean that you should not be practicing what the CDC guidelines are. Washing your hands, coughing into your arm, making sure that you're practicing social distancing like we are right now, making sure that if you have a cold that you stay at home, you self-quarantine. Those things go without having to test positive. We need to be doing that.
And that's so important to remind everyone, because we had an issue here in Savannah where Mayor Van Johnson just today had to remind people this is very, very serious. They've caught a lot of people going out playing basketball together, playing games in very close proximity, and not really taking this as serious as he would like to see us take it.
And I think the mayor makes a great point there. We have to take this serious. Let me tell you, this is very serious, and it does require us to follow those guidelines. You know, the president has extended till April 30th that we follow the CDC guidelines and the social distancing. We practice that. This is so very important to make sure that we flatten that curve, to make sure we don't have any spikes, and we can have a control over that. We owe it to each other to be doing that. This is, we got to practice personal responsibility here as well.
You are right. One of our viewers, though, wanted to know, would it make sense to close the entire country before we are all in a crisis mode? I get the impression you wouldn't agree with this.
Well, keep in mind that the president has closed the flights and travel to certain countries, to hot spots around.
So we have like a partial.
We do. We have a partial. I'm not sure that it's necessary to do, have a total closure. But at the same time, obviously, the president has reacted and the administration has reacted. Keep in mind that it was when it was first reported in January, the president stopped flights to China automatically. That was done in January. So, yeah, we've responded. I know that there's been a lot of criticism that we haven't responded enough. But at the same time, I think that it's been handled in a way that hopefully we can make sure we've got this under control.
Now, this is a long question, so
okay.
Stick with me on this
Sure.
one. If you are renting a house and it is for sale, can the realtor or landlord bring their clients to view the home while your family is there, while the shelter-in-place order and social distancing are both in effect? Are they violating the law by doing so if they don't allow you time to get out of the home?
I'm going to have to answer that with yes, they are violating the law. I mean, Dawn, it comes down to common sense. Why would somebody do that? I mean, give me a break. That's not what we want to be doing here. Look, these are trying times. These are times none of us have ever experienced before. We got to be there for each other. We got to look out for each other. That's not looking out for each other. And I'm going to say that is not what we want to be doing. Now, is it going to hold up in a court of law? I don't know. But at the same time, it certainly doesn't make common sense.
You're right, absolutely right. Well, many of our viewers also have asked about the public and the testing, and they're wondering when we learn that people are positive in our communities. We know that HIPAA laws exist, but they're concerned that maybe in this instance, because it is a pandemic, perhaps we should let the community know so that they can better protect themselves.
Well, the administration has relaxed a lot of the requirements, and particularly with the FDA, particularly dealing with new medications and such. But I haven't heard any relaxation of the HIPAA laws. Those are still very important. I get where you're going. I get where the question is going here, and I understand that. But at the same time, we've got to be careful and make sure that we're protecting each other. But we've got to be respectful of other people's rights as well.
That is true. That is true, because that could certainly cause a whole
Oh, yeah.
different set of issues,
Yes,
depending on who learns. And no one is getting infected on purpose.
Sure.
One small business owner says that she owns a small beauty shop in a partnership with another person. And they said that in the COVID-19 disaster relief program, that small business owner can file for unemployment. But this person went to the Labor Department, where she says there are only benefits available for individuals or employers, but nothing for small business without employees. And she does not want to go through the business loan process if she doesn't have to. She's talked to a CPA as well as a bank and can't seem to find any real guidance.
Well, look, we in the CARES Act, in phase 3 of the coronavirus relief package, made sure that we were addressing the situation with small businesses. There are a number of programs in there, a number of programs that small businesses are going to be eligible for. In fact, just this afternoon at the press conference, Secretary Mnuchin announced that we've got the new form out for the payroll protection program. That is a new program as part of the SBA. And that is very important. I would encourage the caller here, the questionnaire here, to go to our website, buddycarter.house.gov, and make sure and link on there where they can get the answer to this, or to call our office, 912-352-0101. We'll get you the answer to your specific question. But I'm going to tell you, she's got some relief coming, and she's not going to be left hanging, I would assure you.
That is one thing that is hard to explain to many of the small business owners who are not essential businesses, that help is on the way. You all just passed the agreement days ago.
We did, and look, everybody, and I suspect I'll get the question sooner or later, when's my check going to be? Well, again, Secretary Mnuchin said on Sunday it's probably going to be about 3 weeks, but you will be getting the check, and that's very important. And it is important that we not panic. We just need to be as prepared as we can. We need to practice good hygiene. We need to follow the guidelines. If we'll simply do that, we're going to be fine. This too shall pass.
That's right. Thanks so much for your patience, sir. Stay right there. We'll be back in just a moment with more of our questions that are coming in from you on social media with our Right Gas Away.
Updates coming in every minute, but we want you to be as informed as
We want to welcome you back to our virtual town hall meeting with U.S. Congressman Buddy Carter. We're now being joined by WTOC's Right Gasaway, who is monitoring some of the questions you all have been sending in over social media, right?
Congressman, this first question relates to the CARES Act. A viewer asked, why does the stimulus bill not include benefits for college students who are filed as dependents on their parents' tax return?
Well, first of all, understand that if they file a tax return, if the student has filed a tax return, then they'll be eligible for the check. They'll be eligible for the $1,200. But if they are listed as dependent and they don't file any taxes, you're right. That's a gap there that they're not going to be eligible. And nor will their parents get the $500 for them being a dependent.
Congressman, there's conversation about a phase 4. Is that something you guys are looking at doing in another phase, another bill, perhaps a stimulus plan, looking at the college kids, other adult dependents?
Well, yes, there is a lot of discussion about a phase 4, and that's certainly something that we're looking at. After spending $2.2 trillion, our hope, of course, is that we don't have to spend a whole lot more. But we do want to make sure that everyone is covered. Keep in mind now, this is not a bailout bill. This is a liquidity bill. This is not anyone's fault. This is not like '08 when we had bad business practices. This is something that no one can control. And we understand that. We get it. Now, I voted for phase 3, and I do believe if we need to do phase 4 to correct little issues like this, then we should do it.
Well, one of the questions, several people have sent in this question, so we had to share it with you. How are our elected officials making sure that this stimulus plan and the plans help individual taxpayers more than big corporations? People are always afraid that it will turn into somewhat of a bailout.
Great question. And to be sure, we protected against this. Most of what is in phase 3 is aimed toward small business owners and small businesses with 500 or less employees. We made certain that they are taken care of. In fact, we created what I said earlier, the Payroll Protection Program, and that's going to be a program that you can actually get forgiven. So it essentially will turn into a grant and not a loan. But for those companies, 500 or more employees, larger companies, yes, we do have low-interest loans that they will have to pay back. And there are limitations in there. There are checks and balances in there to make sure that the CEOs can only earn so much money, to make sure that there's no stock buybacks. We put a lot of good stipulations in there. So the big corporations, they are important, and we need to make sure that they stay afloat as well. We understand that, but there are a lot of checks in there to where they are not going to be able to abuse this.
Thanks a lot, sir. One other of our viewers actually sent in this question saying that should a warehouse in Savannah that receives and ships bicycles be considered an essential business? The HR manager told everyone that the mandate from our mayor in Savannah does not apply to their jobs because they are a distribution center that handles bicycles.
That sounds like a question for the city of Savannah. On the surface, it does sound a little fishy to me as well. However, again, I would encourage them to get in touch with the city of Savannah because that is one of their rules, or Chatham County, and check with them.
And also, we want to remind our viewers, too, that Mayor Van Johnson did say that you should always call 311 if you suspect that anyone is going around the orders that are in place and that you can remain anonymous. So that's probably a good place for a lot of people to
Absolutely,
start.
good information.
On Facebook, we're getting some questions from people who wish there was more directive from the state and federal government. Earlier today in the press conference, the president said he would not be issuing directives for states to offer minimum guidelines, but that he would reach out to states that went perhaps too far. What do you say to people who want more clear directive from the state government and also the federal government?
Well, first of all, I think that the governor and the president are handling this correctly. And there's no better example than Georgia. We've got a lot of rural communities that don't necessarily need to follow the same laws that they follow in Atlanta. New York City is a problem. There's no question about that. People there live literally on top of each other. They're very congregated. In Atlanta, the same thing. Whereas when you're talking about rural Georgia and South Georgia, that is not the case. So, and then the president, there'd been talk about, let's federalize this and make it cover all states. Well, do we really need it to apply in West Virginia and Idaho as it does in New York State or in California? That's the point that the president's trying to make. And, I've always been one that thinks that the best government is the closest government to the people. And that is what the governor and the president are trying to do here.
Congressman, a lot of the questions we're getting are related to testing, and then, of course, this economic stimulus plan. The most recent one we got is about testing. Someone asked how they can get a test if they don't have a primary care doctor. What's your advice to them?
That's a great question. And what we would advise them, first of all, not everyone needs to be tested. And it has to be the determination of the doctor whether you get tested or not. But if you feel like you got symptoms, you need to be tested, then we would encourage you, first of all, to check with the hospitals, check with the community health centers. If you don't have a primary physician, there are some emergency med clinics around. You can check with them. If they determine that you need to test, they can help you with the test there. And make sure everyone understands that there should not be a charge for the test. That was part of phase 2 of the relief package that we passed, to make sure people would not have to pay for the test.
Congressman, one more question on phase 3. I spoke with a small business owner today who's concerned this will stretch into September, later into the fall. Obviously, the bill outlines the next few months. What would be your message to him, and then what is Congress doing to look at a stopgap funding later through September?
Well, we're certainly prepared to do whatever we have to do. We're going to keep this economy going. Thank goodness we had the strongest economy ever when this hit. If we had been in a bad economy, I can't imagine the situation we'd be in right now. However, we were in a good economy, so we're still good. It's difficult to say. The next 2 weeks are going to be key. What happens the next 2 weeks and how we contain this are going to be the key on how long this lasts, on how much we have to do in the federal government.
I have to ask you this question because several people sent this question in wondering what your opinion was of some of the elected officials and high-ranking CEOs were privy to some information about the pandemic coming down and then decided to look out for themselves and sell stock, and now they want everyone to believe that is okay and absolutely normal.
Well, if you look at my stock portfolio, you'll see I was not one of those.
That's true. Or you were and you had integrity. You didn't sell off.
No, I'm not sure I would have had that much willpower, but anyway, nevertheless, it is disappointing if that happened. Now, that's very difficult to prove, and I know that some of those who have been accused of it or the fingers are being pointed at them. I know them personally, know them to be people of integrity, and I would really be surprised, but if that did happen. But it is at best sloppy, as we could say.
We also want to talk a little bit about the protective gear out there. Everyone is concerned about doctors, nurses, whomever in the field. And I know that many companies, the president has gotten many companies to come on board and focus on making those masks and gloves and gowns that they need. Well, how do you feel about what's happening? Because honestly, many of the nurses we talk to, they are really terrified going to work each day, concerned about their health and the health of their families.
As they well should be. And we found new heroes here. Our healthcare personnel are our heroes now. They are showing up, doing their job, doing what they're supposed to do, risking their own health in order to help others, doctors, nurses, pharmacists, all of them, providing essential services during this time. It's very important. Now, something that we have learned through this is the fact that we need to be independent of foreign countries of getting these PPEs, of getting our pharmaceuticals. Right now I'm working on legislation that will help manufacturers come back to America to manufacture. Just like we learned in the late 70s with the energy crisis that we were too dependent on foreign oil, we've learned now that we're too dependent on foreign countries for our pharmaceutical needs. We need pharmaceutical independence. That's why we're going to try to encourage repatriation for those companies to come back here.
Thank you, sir.
Congressman, we've heard from people who have made comments about rent or their mortgage. Specifically, someone said their rent is due. How can they get help? Our specific question, though, is what kind of legislation are you looking at for renters, assistance or any sort of directive for people that are having to pay rent and their mortgage amid this crisis?
Well, first of all, that's what the check's for. That's part of what we intend for that $1,200 to be used for. We also are expecting, and I will say almost demanding, that the renters make sure that their landlords are working with them, and I think they will. One thing that I've discovered throughout this whole process is the good things that are going on, particularly in our district. I mean, I've seen people just working together, helping each other out, and that's so vitally important. We live in a great area, and people really care about each other here, and that's why we're all working together. We're all in this together. This pathogen doesn't discriminate against one party or the other party. It doesn't discriminate against anyone. That's why we've all got to work together, and our hope is that the landlords are going to take that into consideration. I'm going to be very upset and if I hear of someone getting evicted because they couldn't meet their rent payment this month. We protected against that at the federal level and with HUD, but in the private level, it's difficult to do that.
Well, I want to ask you about, let's see, throughout the country, we keep hearing these stories about churches that are continuing to meet in person. Some even are doing the live streaming, but they still have people come out and gather in the parking lot. And some of the video that we've actually shown, you can tell the people are much too close together. I mean, I realize that all this is common sense, but obviously sometimes having a different messenger to say it,
Yes.
it might go a long way toward changing the actions of some.
Well, and it should be, and certainly we would depend on our religious leaders to set a good example. I mean, all of us need to be setting a good example, and that is not a good example. I will say, however, as I said earlier, when we are finding so much good going on in our communities, our religious leaders have been just fantastic, keeping people encouraged, checking on people, making sure that they're okay. I've been so impressed with the religious community. They've done such an outstanding job during this, just like our medical community has done. I mean, you're seeing America at its best. You're seeing the 1st District at its best right now.
You've seen so many people really at their best. I'm amazed at the number of moms who are at home at sewing machines actually making masks now. And we know that it's not the N95, but it is certainly better than nothing.
Absolutely. And we've got a number of companies right here in the 1st Congressional District that are trying to reassess their programs to where they can help and make some of these PPEs as well. And that's very important and very impressive.
Wright has one quick question for you.
Sure. One more question. The president faced some pressure to ease those guidelines. He extended them, though, 30 days. Today, they painted a pretty grim picture over the next month of what we can expect. What is your message to people who are still skeptical of this virus and its impact?
Well, this is real. All you need to do is to look at New York. All you need to do is to look at Washington. Before I became a member of Congress, I was a pharmacist, as you know, and I serviced nursing homes. And I can remember a flu outbreak at a nursing home that we were servicing at that time where we lost almost 1/10 of the population of that nursing home just because of that flu outbreak. We've got to be very careful. This is a serious bug, and we need to treat it as such because it could have drastic consequences if we don't do what we should be doing in adhering to the principles that have been laid out by the CDC.
Thank you so much, sir. We cannot thank you enough for taking time out of
Absolutely.
your busy schedule to share with us. We want to thank all of you all for tuning in. We also want to